Welcome to this presentation on exchanging credits from the U.S. National Science Foundation Access Program. My name's Joel Adams. Let's see how we exchange credits for time on an Access resource. For the purposes of this presentation, a resource is a computing system that's part of the U.S. National Science Foundation's National Cyber Infrastructure. Access credits are generic currency units you can exchange with an access resource provider, or RP, for time and/or space on their resource. Researchers and educators can get credits by requesting an allocation. Please see the previous presentations in this playlist for more details about these topics. Let's see how to exchange credits for time on an access resource. Assuming you have an access account and an allocation, feel free to follow along on your own computer. To exchange credits, start by visiting the Access portal, access-ci.org. If you're not already logged in, use the Login button to log into your Access account. After logging in, click Allocations near the top of the window. This takes us to the Access Allocations page. There you can see my allocation for this presentation, Allocation for Access Support Demonstration Video, showing 200,000 credits. You may recall that an Explore allocation provides 400,000 credits. An allocation initially provides you with half the requested amount, and provides the other half after you have used most of your first half and submit a progress report requesting the others. Under the Available Resources menu, let's choose Credit Exchange and Calculator. This brings up the Credit Exchange and Calculator page. It begins with several buttons, most of which are for steps we've already accomplished. So let's see what else is on this page. Below the buttons are three top-down selections labeled Using Access Credits, About Access Credits, and Using the Exchange Calculator. Feel free to read what these have to say. We're not going to take time to do that here. The Exchange Calculator itself is actually below those three sections. So we scroll down. Credits can be exchanged for different things on different resources, as indicated by the Unit Type column. Hours of CPU, access credits, number of students, service units, gigabytes of storage, core hours, GPU hours. The exact unit depends on the resource. Note that on a computing resource, 1,000 credits will buy you different amounts of time, depending on whether it's a CPU resource, a GPU resource, and the amount of main memory the resource provides. Depending on your project, you may want to spend all your credits on the same resource or divide them among different resources. The box under Number of Units lets you enter a number of credits to see what they'll provide on a particular resource. To illustrate, let's enter 20,000 credits. Note that the amount column changes in our table. And then let's scroll down to Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, PSC. There we can see that my 20,000 credits can be exchanged for 160,000 gigabytes of storage in PSC's Brain Image Library, 2,240 hours of time on their Bridges 2 Extreme Memory System, 371 hours of time on their Bridges 2 GPU system, 20,000 hours of time on their Bridges 2 regular memory system, and so on. Time on an access resource is slightly tricky because it's measured in CPU core hours or GPU hours, not wall clock hours. To illustrate, if I run my program on a 128-core CPU and it takes 2 hours to finish, then that consumes 256 CPU core hours, not 2 hours. This calculator lets you see the exchange rate for each different kind of system. Note that since GPUs have thousands of cores, a GPU application usually finishes faster than a CPU application, solving the same problem. So a credit provides less GPU time than CPU time. As a first scenario, suppose our project involves running a traditional CPU-based application. Then we might choose between Indiana Jetstream 2 CPU, Kyric at Kentucky, Delta CPU at NCSU, Bridges 2 RM at Pittsburgh, Anvil CPU at Purdue, Expanse CPU at San Diego Supercomputing, and so on. Note that each of these systems exchanges credits 1-to-1 for CPU core hours. To help us decide what resource to use, Access has several tools. If we scroll up, we can go to the Allocations page, and there, under Available Resources, Browse Resources, we can look through the resources and see what each comprises. We can compare Anvil, Bridges to Delta, Expanse. We can read through the descriptions of the hardware and the software on each resource and choose. Alternatively, we could go to the support page and under Tools, we have the Access Resource Advisor that lets us fill in a form, or the Software Documentation Service that we can use to search for particular software that we might need. The resources presentation earlier in this playlist introduced each of these tools. There are also detailed presentations about the ARA and SDS in the Video Learning Center at support.access-ci.org. Back on the Allocations page, let's suppose that after using these tools, we have narrowed our choices to San Diego's Expanse and Purdue's Anvil systems. To exchange our 200,000 credits for time on Expanse, we go back to Allocation My Projects. There, click on the Credits and Resource tab. On that page, we click in the box containing Add a Resource to your exchange. Then we scroll down to SDSC Expanse, CPU. When we do this, two systems appear, Expanse CPU and Expanse Project Storage. SDSC requires us to devote some of our credits to CPU time and some to storage. If we don't know how much storage our project will need, we might start by requesting 1,000 gigabytes, 1 terabyte, on Expanse Project Storage. Since 1,000 gigabytes costs 1,000 credits, and we have 200,000, we can devote the rest to time on SDSC Expanse CPU. When we enter these values, a pie chart appears, letting us see how our allocations credits are distributed. If we want to start over, we can click the Reset form at the bottom. After the reset, we can scroll down and select Purdue Anvil CPU. Doing so reveals that we could devote all 200,000 credits to time on Anvil. If we check the Anvil documentation, it provides 5 terabytes of project storage per allocation. As a different scenario, suppose our project is to run a job that will use both CPUs and GPUs, and we have chosen Purdue's Anvil systems. Since we already have Anvil CPU on our list, we can use the Add Another Resource to Your Exchange box again, find Purdue Anvil GPU. If we adjust our request to 100,047 hours, on Anvil CPU, and 1,485 hours on Anvil GPU, The pie chart indicates that that is dividing our 200,000 credits about evenly between the two systems. Or if we know that the GPU might require more time, we could require less time on Anvil CPU, maybe 50,000, and more time on Anvil GPU, such as 2,000. And keep the rest of our credits in reserve. In short, this credits and resources form lets us exchange the credits we have received in whatever way makes sense for our project. Once we have settled on a request, we can scroll down to the text box where it says, briefly explain how the requested resources and amounts will contribute to your research. There, we briefly describe our plan for using the requested resources so that those reviewing our request can ensure that our project matches the resources. Once we have done so, we click the Submit for Approval button, confirm our request on the screen that appears, and then go work on other things. Most requests have to be reviewed by both Access and the RP, so it may be a few business days before you receive an Access email that hopefully approves your request. After you receive that approval email, you'll receive a separate email from your RP with information about your new account, your username, how to log in, and other relevant details. If at a later date you decide you need to add a different resource or distribute your credits differently, you can use this same form to do so. Just enter your changes, briefly explain, and submit. Congratulations! You now know how to exchange your credits for time on an Access resource. Let's return to our presentation. To summarize what we've just learned, the Access Allocations page is where you can exchange your allocations credits for time and/or space on an Access resource. To get to it, log in at the Access portal, access-ci.org, select Allocations, and under My Projects, find your allocation, choose Credits plus Resources, and click in the Add a Resource to your Exchange box. On the form that appears, you can request time and/or storage on one or more Access resources. Access provides several tools to help you choose a resource. From the Access Allocations page's Available Resources menu, Browse Resources provides a detailed overview of each resource. Credit Exchange and Calculator lets you view how many credits each resource charges for time or storage. And from the Support Pages Tools menu, the Access Resource Advisor, or ARA, lets you fill in a form and then provides a ranked list of resource recommendations for your project. The Software Documentation Service, or SDS, can be used to find the resources where specific software applications are installed. In the next presentation, we'll see how to log into an Access resource, use the Slurm job scheduler to run a program there, and view the results that program produces. Thank you for watching this Access presentation.